front of audiences, when they would ask what's it like being on The Tonight Show, I said it's like there's a doorknob on the front of your TV, and you open it, and you get inside the TV. That's what it's like when you're sitting next to Johnny Carson.
I mean, he was a TV star. He was an American TV star, and I don't think there has been a bigger star. But he didn't do it by acting. He did it by just being himself.
It was real. Everything he said was real, whether he was talking about divorces or drinking or whatever it might be. It really happened to him, and I thought that was really cool.
I don't think anybody was watching Johnny Carson to rate how his material was. Do you know what I mean? You liked him. You liked that man so much, and you went with him.
Everybody kind of watched the same thing, and we all shared that same experience. I don't know anyone who didn't watch Johnny Carson, so we all the next day had the same things to talk about.
This is a guy who was as familiar as a bedtime story.
Certainly the most recognizable person in the United States.
You know, for day in, day out, Mr. Reliable. Oh, I can't wait to hear what Johnny's going to say about this event.
It doesn't hurt to be one of the funniest guys around and be able to be quick and improv, and
he always made the guests look good.
Johnny brought something solidly, broadly, hilariously accessible that just no one else did.
Johnny was a tough, aggressive killer. That's how he got to be Johnny Carson.
Personally, I was often intimidated by Johnny. He was standoffish, there's no question about it. He was aloof.
But he was so big a star that he couldn't shine himself brightly for everybody.
I mean, most people don't live under that kind of magnifying glass like that.
He had that kind of personality that when the light went on, he could do it all. When the light went off, a lot of times he wanted to put the covers over his head and go to bed.
To me, he's the Citizen Kane of comedy, where I met different writers from different eras, and we all had the same story, which is we knew a little bit about him, but not very much, and you piece it together and you try to get a picture, but it's still not the full picture. I don't know what his rosebud is.
Carson is the great American Sphinx. He was on view like a monument, daily, nightly. There he was, Carson, right there before us. And what did we really know?
47 stories beneath the Earth's surface in Hutchinson, Kansas, encased in a cocoon of salt 400 feet thick, can be found the legacy of Johnny Carson. It is a time capsule of popular American culture in the last third of the 20th century. More than 4,000 hours of tape documenting the franchise he hosted for 30 years, The Tonight Show. What Carson was unable to reveal about himself in his private life, he disclosed before a nightly television audience of 15 million people. One looking for evidence will find it on these tapes. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Johnny.
I grew up in the Midwest, kind of a normal, I guess what you'd call normal upbringing, you know, the part of the country. My folks were supportive in what I wanted to do.
Did you always know what you wanted to do?
Oh, yeah.
From the very beginning?
Oh, sure.
How old?
Well, I must have been about 12, 13 years old. I knew I wanted to entertain.
You liked the attention?
Oh, sure.
But why? Why you? I mean, why at age 12 or 13?
Because I was in a play or something, and I got up and I did something, and people laughed. And all of a sudden you say, hey, that sounds pretty good. So it makes you the center of attention.
Yes, but why did you want the attention?
Why did you want the attention? Why did I want the attention? Because I was shy.
Ah.
Because I was shy. Well, that sounds like a ambivalence, right?
No.
On stage, you see, when you're on stage in front of an audience, you are kind of in control. When you're off of the stage or in a situation where there are a lot of people, you're not in control. And I felt awkward. So I went into show business thinking it would give me a little more, I could overcome that shyness.
Where do you think the shyness emanated from?
I bought it in Chicago.
I think everyone gets a little homesick, especially if you have fond memories of your early years, and I do. You want to visit old familiar places and return for at least a moment to an era that gave you a direction in your life. It's lovely countryside, isn't it? I think autumn is probably the most beautiful season in Nebraska. Most of us know it as the Cornhusker State. I simply call it home.
I certainly felt, having come from Nebraska, he never lost that innocence that he projected to the audience of being a lot like them, even though he was this star.
I'm a down-to-earth fella. Just want you to know that. As a matter of fact, today I got out the old hammock, went out, climbed in, laid there for a couple hours sipping a lemonade. Then I went back in. My two butlers were getting tired holding up the hammock.
And I think he had a certain moral compass, kind of a middle America compass, which had certain fairness and certain rules. One of the reasons he was so successful for so long is that people, they saw that.
That's my mother and father.
Right, please stand up and I get it down.
He was a gentle man. He was a very loving man. He was a great role model for Johnny because I think all of Johnny's tenderness and thoughtfulness and sensitivity came from his father. But Ruth had a wild sense of humor. She had an off-the-wall sense of humor, and it was her humor, I think, that Johnny picked up.
There's an old saying about the Midwestern guy. He loved his wife so much he almost told her, and I think he came from that staunch, we love you, son, we don't have to tell you, I mean, that's the sense I get. I could be totally off the wall, but he never lost sight of where he came from, and I think that's pretty important.
John William Carson was born in Corning, Iowa on October 23, 1925. When he was 8, the family moved here to Norfolk, Nebraska, where Father Kit Carson worked for the local power company. Johnny had a younger brother, Dick, and an older sister, Catherine, who was the favorite of Mother Ruth Carson. Mrs. Carson later said that she didn't like boys. They were dirty and nasty and not pleasant. As the middle child, young John felt lacking of the affection received by his siblings, especially Sister Catherine. In later years, he would joke about the lengths to which he'd go to get his mother's attention.
Hi, how you doing? You're Wayne, right? I met you before. Hasn't changed too much outside the interior decoration.
Dad, I've heard your dad put in that fireplace, right?
My dad put that fireplace in, and I used to sit with a deck of cards. I did magic when I was about your age. Every place in the house I had a deck of cards in my hand. Driving my mother crazy. My mother would be upstairs in the bathroom. Now, you may not believe this, but I would go into the bathroom and say, take a card.
Johnny liked to be in control. Being a performer allowed him to do that. That was what he did. As a kid, he would drive people crazy with his endless jokes, just going on, always performing, always learning, always developing his character, which was anybody but Johnny Carson.
I took up magic when I was young because I was somewhat shy and within myself, and I thought, well, that would be a good way to go to parties. I read those ads, be the life of the party and get girls. Mainly I did it to get girls. Neither one worked well. But lots of people do that. They like to get up and perform. You can be the center of attention without being yourself as such.
At age 13, Johnny sent away for a book of magic by Professor Lewis Hoffman. It quickly became his all-consuming interest.
I think magic probably saved Johnny's emotional life as a kid because apparently it was not the warmest of communicative families.
He called himself the Great Carsoni. At his first paid engagement, he earned $3 performing at the local Rotary Club.
Even towards the end of his life, Johnny would always say his favorite birthday gift that he'd ever received was when his mother surprised him with this beautiful cloth that covered the table that he stood behind when he performed magic. He learned the craft of illusion, of becoming bigger, of projecting and misdirecting and giving you a greater sense of something that maybe wasn't entirely always him. His true confidence was born with magic. And if you think about it, he was the most confident guy on television you ever saw.
Do you like coins?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll show you how to make a coin disappear. All right? All right, and we got, you see this? That's a quarter, right?
Yes.
Now, if I take it and hold it, and I give it to you, would you hold it for me?
Yes.
Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Now, watch very carefully. Okay, here it is. And you hold it. Yeah. It's right over here, in your ear.
In addition to magic, Johnny had another life-shaping influence growing up. It happened every Sunday night at 7 o'clock.
And you used to look at the radio. You didn't just listen. You used to look at the radio and listen. I was doing that in Lowell, Massachusetts, and we were both listening and not even knowing it by, osmosis. We were studying Jack Benny.
For years and years and years, I've been Johnny Carson's idol. Now, you've said it, haven't you?
Many times.
Many times. Then all of a sudden, the whole thing switched, and Johnny Carson became my idol. And you want to know something? It's not nearly as much fun this way.
Benny was his idol, Jack Benny was. And he wasn't afraid of silence. And I think he learned that from Jack Benny. Let time go by. Let the audience see how you're taking in what's happening, which is what he did beautifully.
Now, you may not realize this, but every move you make, your delivery, every little inflection that you have is exactly the way I work, and I don't think it's fair.
I love the pauses and milking every moment, and there was nobody better than Johnny with that. With just a look and a face and not doing anything, but doing a lot,
They make jokes about you drinking, like I make jokes about Ed. Can I?
That's may I.
May, excuse me.
You were dangling the participle, and I just wanted to...
Well, I'll wear a long coat and nobody will notice it.
In 1946, after a stint in the Navy, Johnny entered the University of Nebraska and used his college years to further develop as an entertainer. For spending money, he parked his car in front of his Phi Gamma Delta fraternity and charged the brothers 25 cents an hour to use it as a necking parlor. He fell in love with his magic show assistant. Jody Walcott was tiny, acrobatic, and could squeeze into the black box when he sawed her in two. She became the first Mrs. Carson.
Reminds me of my old girlfriend back in Nebraska, Gina Statutory. Name was Gina Statutory, and she went to Lincoln High, and she was voted Miss Lincoln because every guy in school took a shot at her in the balcony.
Upon graduation, he went to work at Nebraska's most powerful radio station, WOW. He played records, read the news, weather and sports, and filled the rest of the time with his patter. For extra cash, he performed magic as the great Carsoni and also did ventriloquism.
The whole world should see this. We all have to begin somewhere. And this is Mr. Carson at a very early age in show business. With his little dummy. What do you think his name was?
You won't guess. Eddie. So nothing has really changed.
Nothing's changed.
This is WOW-TV, Channel 6, Omaha, Nebraska.
Johnny Carson was present in August of 1949 when the first television station in a 5-state area went on the air. Those 1,500 people in Omaha who had televisions invited their friends over to watch a test pattern broadcast 4 hours every day.
And we were all doing radio at the time, of course. And there was an announcement put up beginning Monday. John Carson will do a 1-hour television show. That was my notice. So we went up and tried to pull something together. And we had a little set in the corner. And we went on the air Monday at 4.
We hope a good many of you are enjoying Christmas with your families today. And you've exchanged presents already. Probably had a very nice Christmas dinner. And that you'll sit down and enjoy the Christmas with the gang here at WOW-TV. My name's Johnny Carson.
And there was no money in television in those days, but nobody cared because you were learning what it was all about.
After less than 2 years in Omaha, Johnny felt ready to move up in the world. By now, he also had 3 young boys to support. Through a college friend, he secured an announcing job at the CBS affiliate in Los Angeles, KNXT. He had his first nationwide exposure when he uttered the words, "This is the CBS television network." He set the goal to have a show of his own within a year.
Carson Seller!
He was not a comfortable guy in the beginning. He was what I would call stiff-necked. He was very thin, and he had this kind of, posture that was almost a little like a bird.
Said, "How you doing?" And he said, "Would you come over after the show?" He said, I don't want to be alone. He said, because there were, he said, there were good times too, Not too many people saw that side of Johnny, but yeah, he was hurt. He was hurting.
You could probably find something unpleasant in all humor if you dig far enough. You do a joke about divorce. Obviously, if you dig under the surface, divorce is unpleasant. It's painful. Broken marriages, drunkenness, alcoholism. There's pain and tragedy there. I suppose if you laid any joke open, you could find something unpleasant underneath.
My personal life has been exactly like this year's Academy Awards. It started off with terms of endearment. I thought I had the right stuff. It cost a lot to dress her. Then came the big chill. In the past month, I've been begging for tender mercies.
At the peak of his power, Johnny Carson hosted the Academy Awards 5 times, making him one of the most popular MCs in the history of the show. But this most private of public figures felt the pressure of being on the world stage.
It was a very tough industry audience. He was from television. He wasn't from the movies. He didn't want to force comedy on people right down to the last minute of the 4 hours.
I think he was the greatest. And when I hosted the first time, I completely modeled my performance on his, which was this. Open up, you do 10 minutes of the best jokes you can find, and get out of the way.
Now, a lot of people who come to these affairs try to act blasé, and I'll have to be very honest with you. I am very thrilled to stand up here tonight and gaze out on this glorious throng of beautiful people. I see a lot of new faces, especially on the old faces.
In 1983, Joan Rivers was named the first permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. The appointment reflected how much Johnny Carson loved the woman he had long considered a close friend, among the few who had earned his trust.
Yeah, it's been a long time, you and me.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, people are starting to talk.
You look just as good as ever.
So do you.
Thank you.
I must say publicly, you always compliment me on this show, telling you that you owe so much to The Tonight Show and so forth.
To you, not to The Tonight Show. To you.
But in 1986, Joan Rivers knew this would be her last appearance with the man that launched her career. That night, she wore the same dress from her 1965 debut.
I saved it all because, it was such a big night for me.
Yeah.
I'm wearing the same underwear, which everyone backstage remembers.
At that point, she'd already been talking with Fox and already had a deal for a show of her own. But what she didn't do was tell them long before.
The night before she announced that she was starting a show on Fox at a press conference, Johnny got wind of that because she never went to Johnny and said, "Hey, I've got this wonderful opportunity and I hope I have your blessings, but I wanted you to know." She never did that. She never, ever mentioned it.
And of course, everybody double-crosses everybody in this business. And somehow it was leaked. And I called him, first phone call. And I said, "Johnny," and he had obviously heard. And he hung up on me.
He was furious with her, and I think rightfully so.
And that was it. He never spoke to me again. He took it as a complete betrayal. And I look back, and I think maybe I should have just gone and asked him.
It was that simple, but she just didn't do it. After all the loyalty he showed her, It was a terrible decision.
I don't say this so you feel like I'm bragging. I don't worry about money anymore because I have a fantastic business advisor, shrewd man, bombastic Bushkin. He's got me into some shrewd business deals. I have an all-night liquor store in a Mormon temple. I own a Fredericks of Hollywood in Iran. I'm not into gold or precious metals. Bushkin told me to buy flint.
Carson may have joked about it, but the fact was that by the late 1980s, he believed Henry Bushkin had indeed gotten him into some bad investments. Moreover, he felt Bushkin had enriched himself at Johnny's expense.
Johnny enjoyed loyalty and gave loyalty. But once you crossed him and you were not the person you proposed to be, that was it. Finish.
He felt betrayed by Mr. Bushkin, and if he felt betrayed and that there was no loyalty, then it was over. So he cut it off immediately.
He had people in his life he trusted that were ultimately untrustworthy. His world became narrower and narrower as he went along the Tonight Show and got bigger and bigger and bigger.
No matter how important you think you are, or how much press you get, mothers especially are always able to kind of level it real good. Remember, I got the Governor's Award from the Television Academy in 1980, and I called my mother. And I said, Mom, they're giving me the Governor's Award, you know, it's for your body of work in the television industry. And my mother said, I guess they know what they're doing.
Ruth Carson died in 1985 at the age of 84. Workers cleaning out her Arizona home discovered a box filled with hundreds of newspaper and magazine clippings dating back to the beginning of her son's career. Johnny kept the box in his bedroom closet for the rest of his life.
He remained angry at his mother in ways and also adored her and sought her love and approval till the day she died. But it's very conflicting, and I don't know how much of that transferred into his inability to be a faithful husband.
It did affect his relationship with women tremendously. I don't think he hated women, but I think he was careful to trust them. And when he did, they got his entire trust.
Everybody knows I love you, and that's nice.
Well, when you say love now, what do you mean? I mean, you have an affection for me.
I have more than an affection for you. I love you, and I like you a lot.
He was just terrific. We just never got in the right slot, you know? Missed being free at the same time. By the time we caught up with each other, we were re-involved or something and never got really serious.
Johnny approached 33-year-old Alexis Moss as she walked on the sand in front of his Carbon Beach home. He invited her in for a glass of wine. Soon, she traveled with him to Wimbledon and the south of France, his constant companion.
Look, you have to admit, I keep coming back for more, as I said to the Justice of the Peace.
Though he told her numerous times during their 3-year courtship that he'd never marry again, in 1987, in a private ceremony at his Malibu home, Alex became the 4th Mrs. Carson.
Johnny always felt, I think because of his Nebraska upbringing, that he needed to be married.
And I know that they were madly in love and they were meant for each other. And so I think that she filled a missing piece. I don't think he felt so isolated. I think he felt a true partner in Alex, and he seemed to be extremely happy.
I think what he found, as sometimes older, powerful men find with younger wives, he came to her fully formed, and she had to accept him as he was. He was very much not a public persona in his private time, and she seemed to accept all that in him. And I think their marriage thrived to some degree because of that for a while, until I believe even that wore on her.
I think he regretted he didn't have a closer relationship with his sons than he did. And I think his sons probably felt that too, but he really loved them. Every time he talked about any of them, he would well up with emotion, and he was very proud of all of them.
Johnny's relationship to his 3 adult sons remained distant. He supported them all, giving them just enough to live comfortably. In 1991, middle son Rick was killed when his car plunged off a cliff along the California coast.
So first of all, I want to thank all of you who were so very thoughtful and compassionate and sympathetic with your letters. It meant a great deal to me, and I know it meant a great deal to Rick's brothers, Chris and Corey, and our entire family.
And Johnny, incidentally, was never the same, ever, after that.
This is where I live.
But for Johnny, career had remained his top priority. At the age of 63, he would be challenged by a new late-night host that his network saw as a real threat.
You know, I think Arsenio Hall was the first competitor who came on the horizon that gave NBC the shakes. And I think it really worried them, it shook them, because there was a sense that there's a party going on at the Arsenio show you can't miss.
The best way to compete against Johnny is to find your own niche, find your own genre, and try to coexist with him. My idea was, Johnny has this thing that no one can touch. Maybe I can have the kids of that demographic. Maybe I can have the children of Johnny's audience. That's the key. Don't compete. Find what's uniquely yours.
Eventually, I mean, it's going to end like everything ends. Nothing lasts forever. Everybody has their time on television, then you go on to do something else. It's never been chiseled in stone tablets, you know, that I've got to do this till I die at the desk. I don't want to end that way.
In 1991, well into his 29th year as host of The Tonight Show, Johnny realized his world was changing. Guest host Jay Leno's manager planted a story in the press that NBC wanted Leno to replace Carson sooner rather than later. Johnny was furious.
There was a sense, I think, that he got a feeling NBC was manipulating him out.
Well, there'd been a lot of negativity in the air. It just wore him down, and he felt that he was becoming, that NBC wasn't doing enough to protect him.
I don't think he trusted anybody at the end. Maybe 4 people were able to come in to his world. But he got so, everybody wanted a piece of him. And he just became more and more and more remote.
We'll pick it up from it. I'll pull it around.
Yes.
In May of 1991, before a meeting of network affiliates, Johnny Carson surprised everyone by announcing that he'd retire the following year. This time, he meant it.
NBC never, ever consulted Johnny as to who should be the next host after him. That really hurt him because he had a very good relationship with Bob Wright.
I talked to him a couple of times about it. He did not want to get involved in a direct manner in that issue. He said, listen, I've had this show, I do this show, I don't manage NBC's affairs. I just manage my own. You know, you guys will have to make the right decision yourself. I think that David is a terrific comic. I think he would do very well in the position. If you're going to get him to go there, that's going to work just fine.
I felt strongly that Jay Leno was the appropriate person. Jay Leno had, at that point, been the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson for several years, had been doing it very successfully.
Before we start tonight, I want to tell young Jay Leno I've changed my mind. I'm going to stay.
Johnny was always very gracious. He was always very nice. There was tension, and then over the years, we got to be friends again, and we would talk occasionally. Not a whole lot, because Johnny was a private person. Plus, you always have that odd situation of anytime you invoke Johnny's name, are you doing it for your own self-aggrandizement?
Just how pissed off are you?
You keep using language like that, and you're going to find yourself out of a job.
I do everything the hard way.
and that was hard. But I think, honestly, it had the better outcome for me personally.
Another day, another $2 million.
You know, the build-up to the final show during the last 4 weeks was not to be believed.
Monologue, of course. Bob Hope.
One of the problems you have with a talk show like this is trying to book people. But we had to turn people away. Everybody wanted to do The Tonight Show with Johnny. Everybody wanted to be on One More Time.
Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to quit?
Don't go!
The set, which I assume you're dismantling and setting up at your house. Because it's easier to talk to people like this, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Don't you wish when you had a guest over you could just say, we're out of time?
I said, Johnny, when I go out doing concerts, it's like huge, the response. People are not ready for you to leave. And he said, you know, I've always prided myself on my sense of timing. And this is the time to go.
Raise our goblets, hoist our glasses. On May 22nd, we're out on our asses.
Hello, hello.
You know, he had seen people who stayed too long, and he had made the decision to leave when he was on top, and he did, and he never looked back and never really regretted it.
I talked to him about it later, and he said, I just don't have the energy that I used to have for this show.
It's a very hard thing for a comedian who lives on applause and laughter more than anything else. That is your nutrition, that is your diet, that you're always looking forward to. When am I going to get my next feeding?
But he didn't need to be in front of the audience anymore. He didn't have that need. He really wanted a quiet, private life. He wanted to make his life simple.
Johnny told me that he didn't want to be like George Burns, whose manager propped him up in a chair in his late 90s. He said, why not be remembered for your work in the old days? He felt he had done his 30 years, and that was enough.
More than anything, I think people accepted the fact that it was the end of an era, but I also think they felt like this is a friend of ours that we're not going to see anymore. You know, this is someone who's been in our lives that we're not going to see anymore, and so it was moving.
You people watching, I can only tell you that it has been an honor and a privilege to come into your homes all these years and entertain you. And I hope when I find something that I want to do and I think you will like and come back, that you'll be as gracious inviting me into your home as you have been. I bid you a very heartfelt good night.
And when it was over, it was, and forgive me if this is melodramatic, but it's like watching a relative fade off from a coma to the other world. It was, you know, the screen goes black and the television is off and Johnny's gone.
You know, for my entire career, I've heard comedians in bars debate over who do you think is going to get the Tonight Show after Johnny leaves. What nobody realized is that when you left, you were going to pack it up and take it with you, which is what he did, because that show never existed again. There never was a Tonight Show. It was Carson.
And people would come up to him on a weekly basis and say, we miss you so much. You know, you are so important to us. And, you know, he would say, can't get any better than that. Can't beat that.
One of America's greatest television personalities, Johnny Carson left the Nebraska plains to preside over late-night TV for almost 30 years. The United States honors Johnny Carson, who personifies the heart and humor of America.
Johnny was pitched numerous projects in retirement, but didn't pursue any of them. He knew he could never top what he'd done, and that was just fine with him. Though offered countless awards, he accepted only those he could not refuse. The closest he came to working again was to fax jokes to his friend, David Letterman.
Johnny was so proud. he would call me and say, did you see he used 3 of my jokes last night? And he was like a kid all over again, saying, I love hearing my jokes on the air again.
Johnny Carson made his last appearance on television when he delivered a top 10 list to Letterman. He received a 90-second standing ovation.
We went to Africa, and he learned to speak Swahili. We got over there, we're in Tanzania, and there's Johnny, talking to the guy driving the truck, talking to the guy at the airport, trying to see if it's really good. Do they understand me? Getting more confident. We're way out in the Serengeti, and, he would be talking about elephants or something, and they'd be laughing and, and daring him to do things, and all I know is he was talking and they were laughing. Amazing. That's a gift.
More and more, Johnny retreated behind the gates of his Malibu home overlooking the Pacific Ocean. He continued to play tennis, remained an avid reader, and spent long hours sitting outside gazing at the sea. Friends said that Johnny was never more content than when he was alone on the water, as far away from humanity as possible. In later years, he even saw less of his wife, Alex.
And there was almost an understanding that they were kind of living a slightly separate life, but she understood him and he understood her, and I guess they were just fine with that. I think I also heard that he said, I don't want to be known as a guy who got divorced 4 times.
We went out, dropped anchor, and thought it'd be a nice time for a swim. And Johnny was a very athletic, very strong guy. And he didn't swim any more than a few strokes. And he came up for air, and he said, wow, I'm out of breath already. And you could see he was alarmed about it. It might have been the first time that he had a wake-up call that he had emphysema.
Johnny was one of those people who sincerely believed that he had an immunity against the ills of smoking, and that he had fooled himself into believing that he was one of those people that smoking would never harm.
He had stopped smoking at that time, but I don't think he was too thrilled about the fact that he caused the situation and knew that he did that.
But I think he was covering up. He wasn't letting us know just how sick he was.
And when he got ill, he called me because he knew I was a smoker. And the last thing he said to me was, these damn cigarettes. And I said, I know, John.
Here's that rainy day they told me about, and I laughed at the thought that it might turn out this way.
I think Johnny himself was content and at peace with it, and he didn't want to live a compromised life on oxygen tanks. That wasn't who he was, but he did wish to go at that point. He didn't want to fight.
Funny how love becomes a cold rainy day. Funny that rainy day is here.
So we interrupt this program. That was it.
Johnny Carson died on January 23rd, 2005. He was 79 years old.
I could not believe how stunned I was the day Johnny died, and I happened to be renting a place in Malibu from which I could look right across what is actually called Paradise Cove to where Johnny's house was. I just sat out there. I sat out there for like an hour. You go, and you go, like, you know, I'm not that close to that guy. And then I realized how close I was.
In fact, when he passed away, I read a story in the Omaha Herald of, and they had a listing of all the things that he had donated to, and I only knew a few of them. It was amazing. He would just do it. He would see a story about someone in need and pick up the phone and write a check all the time. And he never said anything to anybody about it.
So there he is in the end with the largest charitable foundation of probably anybody that's ever been in the entertainment business. And nobody knew.
And that was the most intimate relationship, probably between viewer and star in all of television, because of that hour and his role in soothing you at the end of your day. And we can go on and get up in the morning, and it'll be all right, and here we go again. And it was so important, and what he did there, nobody has ever touched.
You're a policeman, you're a nurse, you're a fireman, you're someone who deals with tragedy. You come home at night, you turn on the TV, you just want to have a laugh. He never brought you down to, oh, here's what's going on, oh, my life is so horrible. He always elevated everybody up, and I think that was the key. You felt good after watching the show.
I said, Johnny, I'm mad at you. I think a lot of us are mad at you who have to do this for a living now because you lulled us into doing it by making it look so easy.
Johnny Carson coalesced my life. He gave me something to aim for, something to emulate. Well, that's not going to happen, but, you know, you got to have a target. You got to have something to shoot for. He put me together as a person, honestly. So I forget the question, but that's the answer.
We're drinking, my friend, to the end of a sweet episode.
I would say it would probably be Professor Hoffman's Book of Magic. That would be the Rosebud. The first magic book he ever picked up, and he decided, what's this? A way to transform himself into something else, something bigger, something that would impress and yet quietly do it, elegantly do it. Magic. Magic is his Rosebud.
For all of the years, for the laughs, for the tears, for the class that you showed, make it one for my baby and one more for the road. That long, long road.
The slow moon.
When a sheep explodes.
To learn more about Johnny Carson and other American Masters, visit pbs.org/American Masters or find us on Facebook. Johnny Carson is available on DVD for $24.99 and Blu-ray for $29.99 plus shipping. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen.